We've all been gripped emotionally by games at some point, whether it be role-playing games, a cutscene from an action game, an exchange of dialogue, the moments the credits roll down from our game, or testing our reflexes on a competitive online game. There are so many chances for us to get entranced in moments of great video games. Sadness, elation, terror, rage, uncertainty, just a few types of emotions that can be triggered.
Oh, man.
Well, better than nothing. Oh, I'm sure your friend will be missing this tonight. It's light on the reading, but it's got some interesting photos.
Now, Ellie, that ain't for kids.
Whoa!
What is it specifically that triggers our emotions? What were some of the most pivotal games to be released that had the most emotionally charged moments? Maybe you shed a tear. Maybe you laughed until you cried. Let's go through 5 of the top emotional drivers that have impact in video games. Number 1, character development. I can think of no better character development than that of the relationship between Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us. These two characters followed a very interesting storytelling arc. The bitter old man who lost hope in the world runs into a girl he has to care for, all the while fighting his natural growing attachment to her by shutting her out emotionally. Their journey is filled with this trajectory. Joel gets increasingly more attached to Ellie as they experience new things, and Ellie more fond of Joel, who eventually she can turn to like a father. We can see that in the subtle way she looks at Joel, how her demeanor changes as the game progresses, how the exchanges of dialogue become less static and cutthroat throughout the game, and how the game forces those two characters into close proximity to grow that emotional bond. And with that, the emotional distance between them creeps closer and closer, and they end up becoming inseparable by the game's finale. And like a father, Joel's final moments in the game are clearly representative of his character development. His actions speak volumes. Only a father would do what he did in the finale of the game. Ironic how the character of Joel started off the game as a father, only to apex in the finale as the same. Although in the finale, the love and loss of his daughter in the beginning stages of the game serves as a catalyst to propel Joel into a person with a deeper sense of emotion, and alas, a more unnerving and frightening sense of loss. Joel cannot lose Ellie. He lost one daughter, he can't lose another.
It's okay. It's okay. Joel. It's okay.
And we feel this, the gamers, only because Naughty Dog crafted their story and filled it with such rich development. Playing through the game is just a flat-out joy, if not for the fantastic gameplay and beautiful world, but more importantly, to live the lives of Joel and Ellie just for a moment in time, a few years of peering through the lens into someone else's world. Why was this so impactful? Why is this so hard to achieve? Proper character development asks that you give it time to grow, mature, and sprout. You can't rush it. You can't masquerade yourself as a deep and immersive game unless you take the time to nourish and slowly develop your characters. In the end, it's that feeling that charges the player with emotions and allows us to enjoy the highs of the game in a more meaningful way. It also has to be built into the world and story. If the overarching story means nothing, character development has no impact. The story of The Last of Us was so personal and so vital, a journey that allowed the development of its characters to blend naturally into the storytelling process. It was a game to me that was defining of my generation, if I can be frank. I shed more than one tear, and I am absolutely not afraid to say that it was a beautiful piece of art that I will never forget. And when I think back to The Last of Us, I think about the characters because they were developed in the proper way. Number 2, the death of a protagonist/antagonist. Ask anyone who has owned a PlayStation to recount the top memory of any game on that platform, and I'd be willing to bet a large chunk of those people would say the death of Ares in Final Fantasy VII. Good versus evil is the quintessential video game story arc. It's the breath many role-playing and adventure games breathe and use as a foundation for their stories. It's also a reflection of traditional storytelling. Good finds out evil exists, which is the exposition and the conflict. good pursues evil, tension and rising action, evil hurts good, the crisis, and good wins out in the end, the finale or the resolution. Any protagonist labeled good to the player and built up with enough character development that perishes is always a moment that will grip players. But it doesn't even have to be built up. Just the fact that the character is on our side is enough to make it impactful. Look at Sarah from The Last of Us. We know her just 30 minutes into the game, but god damn is her death impactful. The guard with the gun is evil and Sarah is good. The mere existence of danger to someone good makes us protective of our protagonists. And when a game presents a moment where we cannot protect our protagonists, it sets a very special moment, and a very sad one too sometimes. We want to protect Sarah. We wanted Joel to, but he couldn't. We couldn't. The same way we wanted to protect Titus in Final Fantasy X from his inevitable fate from the Faith. We wanted Titus and Yuna to end up together, but Titus was never real. He was a dream, and he died a dream in the arms of Yuna. The death of a protagonist is always emotional. The death of an antagonist can also be just as poignant. I can recount some very mixed emotions when Seymour Guado died in Final Fantasy X, knowing of the trials and tribulations that he encountered throughout his life as a half-breed that pushed him to make some of the decisions that he made that affected my characters. Deaths of main characters are often bittersweet, but can lead to very emotional moments that ultimately can be good. The sour aftertaste on a very sweet bite makes the sweet taste all that much better. Other notable deaths in games that had really big impacts include the death of John Marston in Red Dead Redemption, Mordin Solus from Mass Effect 3, and Isara from Valkyrie Chronicles, among many others. The third element in video games that have very strong emotional impacts are interactive character segments. I'd like to take a minute to talk about moments during games where you are in control, but story elements are happening around you that invest you into the story directly. Once again, I'm going to talk about The Last of Us. Let's take a look at the opening of the game. I'm just going to let this clip play out.
Get out of here now. There's a gas leak. Hey,
There seems to be some commotion coming from
get the hell out of here, right?
Oh god. Dad? Dad?
Some sort of parasite or something. You gonna tell me what happened?
Those people are on fire.
Don't look, Sarah.
The opening of The Last of Us is a crown achievement of how to grip players without saying much. There are very few moments that take control away from the player in this scene. The player is alive during the story, the environment is creeping in around the player, and the tension is pulsating. I get goosebumps watching this scene like I do when I go into a haunted house during Halloween. We know something is about to happen, but we don't want to accept it. The feeling of dread and anticipation is deafening here. It's organic and it's natural. Many other games attempt to pull off this kind of interaction, and many fail. Games like the new Homefront and Dying Light try to weave this into their games, but it's often too forced and thrown in your face. Using a subtle hand is the most powerful trick. Silence can penetrate more than words do, after all. Silence can allow us to get absorbed into the game world because it fills the air with tension. Crafting such a scene requires extreme amounts of restraint and attention to detail, an achievement rarely reached. Which is why when a scene like this comes around that you can actually play, it's so immensely satisfying and impacting. These types of interactive storytelling segments also do something that gamers appreciate. They put trust into the player. They trust us to live out the scene. They trust us to live out that moment the way the character would. The way Sarah would in that scene without need for a scripted, linear, or full motion cutscene. We like to be trusted and treated like adults by developers. We admire that kind of respect. In turn, we are freed from the limitations of a traditional cutscene and therefore get more invested because we are directly in control. Number 4. Achievement and mechanical success. We tend to get emotional in moments of achievement and mechanical success. Most of this is found in the realm of challenging games or competitive games such as MOBAs or first-person shooters. With challenging games, usually most satisfaction is derived when a game is consistently fair, when it demands mechanical precision from the player. Mechanical precision is a derivative of mental composure, and when we are mentally composed, we are engaged completely. Games like Ninja Gaiden and Dark Souls require hefty amounts of mental composure and reward players for taking the time to learn the systems of the game and be proficient mechanically. The more challenging the game, the more rewarding the sense of achievement is for overcoming those hurdles and those challenges. Acing a calculus test when you have been taught calculus is a lot more satisfying than waltzing through a basic math test. Easy games don't give us the highest of the highs like hardcore games do, a feature that many people flock to get their emotional kick in gaming. The great thing about mechanically skillful games is that the player gets physically attached to the game, literally with their controller. When you are using your mind and your hands together in unison, it just feels better than putting your brain into autopilot with an easier game. You lose that mind and body connection that way. Competitive games feed us that intrinsic sense of accomplishment through pure competitive gameplay. We want to be the best. We want to win and beat our opponents in every match. Nobody likes losing, and because of that, winning feels so much better when we compete against opponents of like skill. It's why people are drawn to ladder boards and rank systems in games like League of Legends. We want to know where we stand. Sometimes, emotional highs in these games can be quite immense, due to them being extremely mechanically focused. Competitive games demand your skill, your patience, and your game understanding to succeed, and in turn, you make decisions on a moment-to-moment basis, and sometimes in split-second scenarios where your reflexes take over. When a person's reflexes take over, it's automatic, it's involuntary, a state where the player didn't have to think about it, he just acted. We are born with most of these reflexes, and we forget them over time. We untrain a lot of them through our lives. Playing a competitive game allows us to reforge those reflexes into weapons that allows us to be more efficient and smart players, which in turn cranks up that emotional dial in times of competitive matches. The better your reflexes, the more moment-to-moment success you'll have. You'll feel more highs due to chemistry accelerated during stressful, competitive, or challenging games. And that leads us to number 5, player choices. Games like the Witcher series, Heavy Rain, Deus Ex, Mass Effect, and The Walking Dead, among others, devise critical story moments around decisions that have to be made by players. We hope, as players, that our decisions matter and that we can dictate what happens next. Sometimes we can, and sometimes it's just an illusion. When it does matter, we get immensely attached to games. That is because choice usually involves a moral code. In Heavy Rain, there is a section of the game where you have to make such a choice. You are a father and you want to save your son. You wind up at a drug dealer's house with the choice to take his head off with a pistol or not. If you do that, will you regret it morally? Or will you regret it because it may dawn on you after that you could have interrogated that man for information? You could have sheathed your emotions for a second to guard you from making a wrong mistake, but you didn't. You reacted as many would and killed the man. Would he have the key to saving your son if you let him live? That's the beauty of choice. You don't have the gift of foresight, and the choice you make may have repercussions down the road, although it may not. Another fantastic example of choice resides within Mass Effect 2, when Shepard must decide between creating genocide on the Geth species or reprogram their minds so that they share the same ideals and beliefs as themselves. The reason for this is complicated, but the choice remains the same nonetheless. The choices in these examples highlight something more than that though, more than just the choice. They represent the bigger question, outside and larger in scope than what to decide. Do you believe in murder? What kind of moral code do you live by? You are the reflection of that character. You're controlling it. How do you want to be remembered? Or better yet, what gives you the right to carry out these choices and decisions? Are you good or are you bad? The best choices in games don't offer any easy answers. They live in the gray area, the place that is filled with question, conflict, and ambiguity, a body of water where you aren't sure what's below the surface. By demanding your participation in choices, games force you to consider these things inadvertently and ultimately prod at our emotional consciousness in some strange and interesting ways. So that's it. Those are the 5 reasons I came up with for emotional drivers in video games. I'd love to hear what you guys can come up with. You guys can share it in the comment section, and as always, hit the like button and drop the sub if you enjoy the content. If you did not, don't hesitate to thumbs down me. I believe in critique, so make sure to let me know why you didn't like the video if you did thumbs down the video. And as always, wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day or your night or your afternoon, whatever it happens to be, and I'll see all you lovely people next time.